I was a bit scared because, you always have that imposter syndrome and like, okay, so how is someone going to look at me when I keep asking what I would personally term as stupid questions, but in real essence, they're not really stupid questions, just questions that are meant to help you understand the concept better. But with time, I've gotten to appreciate it because it has really, really helped myself to really, really grow as a developer because I get to understand code from someone else's perspective. And as we know, when it comes to writing code, there's everyone has a unique pattern or a unique way of writing their code. So getting to also understand from other people how they do it, it's quite a really thrilling experience. So yeah, as you questioned, my name is Wen Kakuo. I'm a front-end engineer, currently working at Sky Garden. Also a Google developer experts for Angular. Mostly the term is spreading the gospel about Angular in communities, different parts of the country, different parts of the world. And my socials is at Wayne_Gakuo on Twitter. That's my GitHub handle. On LinkedIn, just search for Wayne Gakuo and definitely find me. Fun fact about me is that I prefer living in Mombasa. That is where I currently am, than in Nairobi because I love the fact that I'm in a chilled environment, whereby Nairobi it's too hectic for me, I'd say. But yeah, so born and raised in Mombasa, schooled in Mombasa. When in the university, I just went to Ghana. That's where I did my computer science studies, but came back again and currently working remotely as a front engineer and been quite an experience. And that's a story for another. Yeah. Yeah. So today's talk, it's going to be mainly about internationalization in Angular. And I'm just going to cover some basics of i18n. And I hope that this will also be helpful for anyone else who wants to get started with it. So yeah, let's get started.
Great.
So, yep. And so in quite of a nutshell, visualization or i18n is basically the process of design and preparing your project for using different languages. And the reason why it's even called i18n is because there are 18 characters between I and N. So we have I, that's internationalization about. And inside internationalization, it includes some few actions. One is separating your content for translation. And then the other one is updating your app to support bidirectional text, left to right or vice versa. So bidirectional text may include just such as Arabic, which usually sometimes you have the text spanning from right to left and all that. So one of the processes or one of the actions in internationalization is making sure that your app supports those kind of text, because when you have translations, right, you're translating it in different languages and you'll find like some languages have different semantics and how it's supposed to be written. So internationalization helps you to make sure that your app supports that. And then what I usually say localization is some sort of is kind of the hood of internationalization. So internationalization or i18n is an umbrella, and then inside it you have localization. So this is usually the process of building versions of a project for two different locales. So for example, you'll find, I'll give an example of English, right? You'll find that English from America is different from English in the UK, right? And so localization is always about making sure that whatever English you have suits that particular locale, because you don't want to be writing, you don't want to be using one language as a standard for everyone, because not everyone understands that particular language in different states, different parts of the world. Another example is here in Kenya, one of our national languages, which is Swahili, has different, how I would say, dialect, because you have Swahili from Mombasa, which is where we are right now. You have Swahili from Lamu, which is what we call Kiamu. In Mombasa, we call it Kimbrita, a little bit mixed also with Kiamu. And then when you go towards Nairobi, you'd find like someone who's speaking Swahili in Nairobi may not understand the person who's speaking Swahili in Mombasa. So this kind of localization is super, super important so that you can be able to, I'd say, touch the different parts of your markets, right? For example, just to make sure that you you're touching the base, for example, and making sure that translation or context is not lost at the same time. Because at the same time, also when it comes to language, context really matters. So how localization is usually denoted as is the language ID, which is, for example, EN, and then the locale extension. So as an example, here you have English in the US or French in Canada. Right? So that's just an example. And some of the actions that include when it comes to localization is one, you extract the text for translation to those different languages, and then also formatting that data for specific locale. And what is a locale? A locale is a region where people speak a language or a language barrier. So as an example of Swahili that we speak in Kenya might be different depending on the geographical location. And some of the formatting of locale will include measurement of time, numbers of currency, and also translation of names such as time zones and languages in other countries. And so that's just a brief on. So I'm just going to go into the technical part of it. That is what the code is all about. So the first step for you to be able to start having i18n onto your application is in this case, we use a package called Localize. There are quite a number of packages out there, third-party libraries, which will help you to do the translation. For in this case, you're doing Angular Localize. The Angular's Localize one is already supported by Angular and it's always maintained, has a huge community. And at the same time, it has some very, I would usually say, very neat features when it comes to localization. And I think this is something that I usually just recommend people to use, but you're not really tied down to just using Angular Localize. You can always use other packages as well. So how to add that particular package is just ng add at Angular Localize. This will just download that npm package and then install it onto your application.
Brian,
And so,
Brian,
yeah.
quick question. You can go to the previous slide. So Angular is a framework, so it offers you a lot of packages for you. So you don't need to look for a different packages outside, and you can get benefit of a localized package of which Angular recommends and which is well maintained. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't able to mention that. But yeah, it's really good explanation on it. Yeah. So now you've been able to install the Angular localized package, right? So you want to make sure that you start to mark your translation. I mean, you want to mark the text for translation. And so how do you do that? Angular itself, as a framework, provides us with an attribute called the i18n, which can be used to mark those HTML elements that you need for translation. So how do you do that? Inside the element, just add the i18n attributes. And what this is going to do is at runtime or at compile time, your Angular app is just going to look through your application and says like, oh, I actually found an element that needs to be translated. So, okay, so I've gotten it. So what do you want me to translate it to? For example, you want to translate it to English, you want to translate it to French, you want to translate it to Spanish, depending on what you want. So always having that attribute inside the HTML element is pretty important so that you can have that text translated to the language of your choice. And then also we have the i18 attribute for the attributes. So inside the HTML element, you might have something like a placeholder, right? And this placeholder says type in your full names or insert email address, right? So how do you make sure you also mark that for translation? So if you want to translate those attributes of an HTML tag, you do so by using the i18 attribute as i18n and then dash and the attribute name itself. And in this case, we have this placeholder. So as you can see in the code snippet, the i18n dash placeholder, what it's going to do is it's going to make sure that it marks the placeholder attribute text for translation to whatever language that you need. Exactly. I hope that's pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So enough talking. Let me show you some code.
Yes.
So, um, so in here, I have a pretty simple app that I built, and this is for just a minute.
So this is a simple Angular app or
Mhm.
using for the demo. Cool.
Yes. Yeah. So for those who probably don't know what Anchor is all about, as Anil has mentioned, it's a framework that you use to build websites, and mostly front-end developers who are interested in using Angular. I would really recommend it. Just check out the documentation. It has pretty straightforward ways of starting off in Angular. And for me, I've always loved using Angular. I've been using Angular for almost 4 years now. And I started off with a bit of skepticism. I didn't know what this Apple, I mean, this framework was all about. There was a lot of chatter about its dying off, but it's been 4 years. But the app, I mean, but the framework itself has been here for right now 9 years. So it means that it's still going strong and more people are getting adapted. So this is a very small project that I built for this particular demo. And what it basically has, it has the basic structure of an Angular application. And I'm going to show you just step by step. So as you saw, we had installed our package. I already have it in this application, so I don't need to add it. And then what do? I want to mark those texts that I need for translation. So how do you do that? So for example, my element says, for example, hello there. This is a code, a demo for internationalization in Angular. I want to mark this particular text for translation to whichever language I will select. So what do? I add the attribute i18n. And the beauty of it is that also, for example, when you use an IP like WebStore, tells you what that particular attribute is all about. And so and also gives you a link, for example, to if you want to know more about it. So yeah, so I've marked my text for translation. I've done that also for my placeholders inside my inputs. And then also we have the select element. And inside the select element, I also mark it for translation. And what this is going to do is that, so look at it as whatever you tell the parent to do, the children will follow. So inside the select element, you have options. So if you just put the i18 attribute on the select elements, also the options will be translated. So you don't have to put i18n in the options one by one because it's going to cover everything. And then also if you want to translate your labels, just the same thing. And yeah, I think this is pretty much it. So I've marked my text for translation and now I am ready to set off and, translate my text. So let's go back to our slides. Now you have marked your text for translation and you want to prepare those files for complete translation. So after you're done prepping, the next step is usually to extract that text to a translation source file. And how do you do that? There's an Angular command called the ng extract i18n. Just a quick one. I think previous versions had a different way of extracting the translation file, but the new one is ng extract -i18n as it's shown here. And then output path, and then SRC local. I'm going to show you what this means. So what this command does is that it creates a folder called local. As you can see, SRC local inside our source folder, which is basically our root app inside us, and creates a message.xlf file inside it. Remember, we have not put a name. So what it's going to do, it's automatically going to name that file as messages.xlf. And then what this output flag is is all about is that it's used to set the output path for that generated translation file. So if you want to put it in another folder, let's say a components folder or whatever folder you want, just make sure you put the flag output path and then where you want it to be extracted to. Again, so I'm going to show you the code. So I have done it already on this application. And if I do it, for example, it's going to go inside my SRC folder in my Angular application. And then inside my SRC, I have the local folder. So remember, inside our code, we had SRC local. That means go inside the SRC folder, create another folder called local, and then create that file inside it. If the local folder exists, just create that particular file for translation. So as you can see, we have it over here, messages.xlf. And what this is going to do is that it is going to go through your whole application, your components, to make sure that it sees the text that have been marked for translation. So for example, remember in our app component, we have the P tag, right? That says, hello there, this is a code demo for Internationalization in Angular. If you go to a message XLF, we'll see it over here. And it's inside a tag called source. So just a quick one. In your XLF file, you have things like translate, you have source, you have context,
Right.
and all that.
Question.
Yes.
Why is the xlef format? Is it a default one? Can I override instead of xlef? Can I use a JSON file format?
Yeah. So XLF is the default one, but if you want to choose JSON, you can definitely do so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So when I try to export, I can specify the file format, and then
Yes,
I can
exactly.
choose if it's a JSON. Oh, okay, got it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the default one, and it's going to extract all those particular text for translation. You have what is called a trans unit. So trans unit is just a direct way of saying it's just translation units, means whatever is inside this unit is supposed to be translated. And then inside the trans unit, you have an ID. So this ID is specifically unique to that particular element that you tagged for translation, right? So it takes into account even a full stop, a space, the text itself, and all that. So whenever you do, for example, change, let's say your landing page, you change some few text somewhere, you have to make sure that you still extract that file again so that the ID can be unique. Because if you don't, Angular is just going to be confused because like, hey, you're asking me to translate this particular section, but the ID does not match what I already have. So it's very, very important. If you have any changes in the landing page, you um, you extract again the files again, so that can be the translation ID can be translated. So this ID is very, very, and
Uh,
so
this ID is generated on the fly by Angular. It's not.
by Angular,
We
yes.
can we give it a try? Like for example, you change something simply on app.component HTML, and if you try to extract, will this ID get also updated because we have some changes?
Mhm. Okay, all right, I'll do that. Okay, so I'm just gonna add a link to it.
Uh huh.
And I'm just going to go get my command, and the command was ng extract. Dash dash outputs. And just as a heads up, please always feel free to always be checking t-shirt now and then, because people have this notion like, oh, as developers, we know everything. But in truth, we are always looking up for something. So don't always feel that you cannot,
Hmm.
or you have to cram every command.
Hmm.
Yeah, so they do that.
Okay, so it's now generating the
Yeah.
font.
It may take a bit of time. Yeah.
So once it's done, it's gonna assign a unique IDs in the messages locale. Okay, you could see it has dated, and if you look at that here,
You
okay,
can see.
it
Well,
has
so you
yeah.
can see the changes. It's now, it was 8304, blah, 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 14, but now it has changed to 156367.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a unique ID, kind of a snapshot where in this version it has this particular translation messages. Cool.
Yeah. And also another thing is you can also put the ID of your choice if you want, but you don't necessarily have to do that because Angular can do that for you out of the box. So
Mhm.
make sure that. Yeah. And so we now have the translation unit. That's what, oh, I haven't mentioned about the context. So basically this context group element is just about where exactly can you find this particular text. So as it tells you here, we have the source file. Where do you find it? Inside our app component.html file, which is over here. And which line number can I get from? It's line 9. So you can see over here, and it spans all the way to line 10. That's what it tells you over here. So that is basically what a translation is all about. So that is the same for the other texts. We
Mhm.
have the source, we have the context group, the translation it again, and
Mhm.
then just going to show you, I'm going to show you for the select. So, so you can see over here, so you can see over here. Oh, yeah, here it is. So for the select option, right? Remember we were taking the select option to have the select options to also be tagged for translation,
Mhm.
right? So inside our messages.xml, it has also been generated. So for the expertise, the text itself has been marked for translation. Here it is. Remember, here it is. And so as you can see over here, we had a placeholder called expertise, for example, in our select. So the attribute in this case has been marked for translation, the attribute placeholder. And then for the options, of course, they come after. It's going to be one big translation unit. And then inside this translation unit, you have those options. So here you have source. And then I'm just going to, let me just do this so that you can be able to see for everyone. So to make sure that you can see those options.
Maybe you can search for the option.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Hold on. Um, okay. Okay. So beginner, of course, you have beginner, and then you also have what's intermediate. Here you go. You have
Mhm.
intermediates. And
Mhm.
then we also had the experts. Right here. Okay.
Oh.
So as you can see, each 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 option has also been marked for translation, and it's going to be inside one translation unit
Mhm.
element. And of course, it's been tagged for translation. And then that also happened to show also the context, where exactly can you find them and where do they span. So in this case, it says that it spans between line 22 to 24.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
One
other
question.
question?
Yeah, one question on this. This is great. And how do you add a new language? Let's say I see that on the locale folder, default English, French, and Spanish. Let's say I want to add German. How do you make sure you add that, and how the messages looks like in the XLF file?
Okay. No one is, I'm getting to that one. Okay. So we've created, the translation file. So example, in this case, we have that. And then now, for example, as you mentioned now, you want to give this particular, you want to translate this text into different languages, right? And in this case, let's say you want to build it in German, right? So how do you do that? So how you do that is you copy the file itself, the message.xlf, and then just paste it. And then what you do is you name it by adding an extension of, say, GE for German, for
Uh,
example.
maybe I think maybe we can use a D Deutschland.
Okay.
D,
DE. Okay.
yeah, for example, yeah.
Yeah. So DE. Okay. So press OK. Right. So now we have, message.de.xml. So that means that you want to translate whatever text you have in English into German. You'll do that of course, for other languages of your choice and all that. So something happened. So inside the messages.de.xlf, right, we have, again, of course, a translation unit and all that. So if you want to now translate this particular language or these English words to German, how you do that is you copy. Okay, you don't necessarily have to copy. What you just need to do is below the source, you just added a tag called target. And inside this target, what is going to happen is you are going to input that particular translation. So if you want to translate hello there, way in blah, 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 you're just going to translate it. You're just going to go to, let's just use Google for that. Translate. I want to translate from English, but this is usually not really recommended. What's recommended is that you want to have a translator or an experienced translator in your team so that they can be able to translate this word properly. Because again, remember, context really, really matters, because when you look at sometimes the translation that is done on Google, for example, or when you're on Twitter and it's translated to English, the words don't really make sense. Like, yeah, you understand what the subject is all about, but then when it comes to look at the wording, it's not really accurate. So it's very, very important to have at least a professional translator in your team so they can be able to look at this translation. So, but for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to choose Google Translate. So I'm just going to copy this and then paste it over here inside our target.
Mhm.
And what this means is that you're telling Angular that, hey, Angular, I have a source that I need to be translated. And where do you want to translate? And what exactly do you want to replace this with? I have a target and this is what I want to replace it with. So depending on the extension that you would have configured, for example, for the German, I'm just going to go through that file, look at the source, and then provide you with the target.
Mhm.
So this happens for every single translation. So again, for name, just add target.
So for the default language, we don't add target. For the all other language,
Mhm.
we add. So you know that it's like a this ID, which is target for this particular language, for
Mhm.
this default one. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So it says yeah in name in English is the same as German. Okay. So
I think we can
also
two examples are enough, like the
okay.
lang the so we know that it's
Yeah.
there.
Okay. All right.
How do we
So
include that? Do we need to do any other additional step like, hey, my selector has only 3 languages, but now I would like to also add a German. I think maybe you need to add the option to select that language, right?
yeah. So you can always do that. For example, if you have some sort of like how do I say? So when you come to build your application, your app is going to be using the different languages that you provide, right? And the reason Angular does this is because it wants to optimize on performance. It doesn't want you to be booting up every other language at the same time because that is really going to lag your application. So what it does is it provides you the different builds, and then based on, for example, URL, for example, stroke en or de, it's going to load for you that particular build. So you don't have, so what it does is like, it doesn't load up everything all at once. It just provides you with the builds. And then whenever you want to select a particular language based on like URL, for example, that's when it provides you with that particular application.
Got it.
Yeah. And so right now you've provided the text that's supposed to be translated. And what's next is that now you want to serve that particular application in the multiple languages. So in this case, now we have English, we have French, and also we have German, right? And so inside our Angular.json file, we define the locales that have been defined inside our build configuration. And then we also set the localize build configuration option, and then also the configuration for production build. So if you go into our Angular.json, we have one for defining locales in the build configuration. So inside this i18 demo property, you add another property called i18n, and then we put in the locales. For example, here we have uh, Spanish and French. So now we want to add German. So what we're going to do is we're going to say it's going to be DE. And where do you find that particular file? SRC, local messages.de.xlf, right? So that is part one. That is defining the locale in that particular build configuration.
Mhm.
The second part is you want to set the localized build configuration option, which is going to instruct the ahead of time compiler to use that translation configuration. Remember when they mentioned that when your application boots up, it doesn't boot up everything, right? But whenever you select a particular locale, for example, it's going to only pick what is needed. So it doesn't have to boot up everything all at once because again, performance is really, really important. And you selecting a particular locale will allow you to do that without having to compromise on performance. So in this case here, we have French. And so by default, it's usually English. So you don't need to add English over here unless for some reason you want to provide a different language for it. So we're going to add DE because we also already have for French. And then we're just going to say localize. Then it's going to be DE, right? So we've set that. And then the other one now is for the builds,
Mhm.
right? And then, so we're just going to copy this for the sake of time. And we're going to rename it to DE. And you say that i18 demo, DE and not FR, because FR is already there and
Mhm.
ES is already there.
What is this browser target? Will it influence the URL, like my ABC
Yes.
website slash
Yes.
forward slash DE? Okay,
Mhm.
cool.
Yes. Yeah. So now you're done with doing it in the Angular.json, as you see. So now you want to see your translation in a local environment, right? And in this case, you have ng. In this case, what you do is use the command ng self, which is what we usually use when you want to just test your app locally. But in this case, remember, you want to see it in a particular language, right? We have French, we have German, we have Spanish. So in this case, I want it to be shown, for example, in German. So how do you do that? Go back and do ng serve, just do ng serve, -- configuration. Let's go to check. Then this case is TE, right? Which is one we had for French. I mean, for German. So press enter. It's going to build that particular, it's going to serve you that particular application in German, depending on the translation files that you've provided. So remember, we only added 2. We only did translation for 2 files. So just to make sure we are, yeah. So it usually might take a bit of time, but it doesn't take so much time.
Okay. Meanwhile, it's preparing. Do you have any recommendation on the Angular localize package? They have recommendation for when to use numbers in which format, pluralization, recommendation on that.
Well, when it comes to these packages, it usually depends on how you want your application to look like. If you want to go the way of having a translator, right, do everything manually, which tends to be a bit tedious, then you can definitely go for this. But if you want to have, I don't know, some sort of like a plugin to translate your text, we have quite a number of them. I think we have NGX Translate. I've seen people using it. And, but for some reason also you'll find that for some of these packages, you need to pay for the translation. So for example, if you want to use Google Translate, you have to pay for it and all that. So it usually just depends on how the company wants to go. If I give an example of a company I was working for, I was working for a company called Kobiro. What we did is inside our HTML files or a template, we marked our text for translation using a pipe called translate. And then we used, when it comes to like, for example, I'm just going to give an example of, let's say a text. I'm going to put like a P that says, maybe this text says hello, right? We use IDs, right? And how do we do that? That is, we usually say hello, like this. And what this does is that in the background, and sorry, translate, right? Right now it's going to show red because it doesn't know what this is. But that was what we used to do. And so what this does is that whenever we compile our application, Angular sees what this ID is all about, and they find like, oh, this ID is supposed to be for a translation file. And what it does is it goes into our JSON. Inside this particular JSON file we had the ID and then what the text is all about. So inside our JSON file, we had something like, for example, you have something like hello, and then this hello means, says hello, right? And so by runtime, it's going to replace this hello with the text that we have, and then also translate it that particular language of our choice. So that is really, really dependent on how the company wants to go.
Cool.
So yeah. So I think it's a word that we usually see as developers. It depends.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So we see that as local server is running.
Yeah.
So
So just going to check our localhost. So it's going to deactivate this translation. So as you can see, English, it was Halloween, right? But now it's been translated to French. Halloween, I can't really pronounce. But as you can see over here, it's been translated to a language of your choice. Again, for example, we want to say change, we want it to be served in French, right? How do we test that? Just going to stop the serve, and I'm just going to replace DE with FR.
mhm.
And now our application is going to be translated to French locally.
How does it work when you deploy, like you deploy separate packages for each language, and so that way when it's already deployed, so you will have a quick access to see the different languages much faster. This is
Yeah.
only for
So
local testing.
yeah, so there's a command for it, and remember inside the JSON file that we have is we put specific commands for builds for the different languages. So with just that one command, it's going to build all those languages for you. So inside your dist folder, you're going to find the different languages, right? And I'm going to show you how that goes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So for just going to refresh this. So remember now, if you can remember that inside our HTML, we changed the text from hello there to hello there way. So as you can see over here, this is not being translated. And that is because we have not updated the source for the French file and the Spanish files because we only changed it for the German. So as you can see over here, it is still in English, but the rest of it is French. And that is because the hello there text was changed, but it was not updated, the XLF files. So that is one thing also to note.
So
So as you can
more
see,
like acts like more like a, hey, it got changed, but so I'm gonna default it to the what's there in
to the
English.
ones.
Uh,
Exactly.
got it.
Exactly.
So that's ID gonna make you that, hey, this is not updated. And okay, got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to check the ID for the default one, that is the English, and then the one for the translation. But then finds like, hey, these IDs don't really match. And that is, I'm just going to show it for the purposes of understanding. So as you can see for the French, the ID here for the hello there was 830414. But when it goes to the default one or the main source, it is 15632.
Mhm.
So that means that you need to also update those translation files.
Got it.
Yeah. And so that's pretty much it. And let's moving on to the next one. Quick. Now, so for example, you put all the translation files and all that. So how do you prepare your application for hosting, right? We do ng build localize and just ask you what question you are asking. And what this will do is it's going to build for you trans those different translations. And the reason why it does that, I will show you why. So I'm just going to do ng build, localize, and ask which for it to build. So I'm just going to go through this is where the application is like, why does Angular handle the translation in this particular way? So one, the translation step is done as part of the build process. So your build times are not impacted by the localization step. That means that for a particular language, it's a different build. So depending on the flag that you put, whether French, whether German, and the other translations won't come into play. It's just going to be that particular translation that you've set. And then when it comes to performance, when you change a language without really reloading the page, for instance, each translation creates new bindings, and each binding is an extra instruction that's added to the apps bundle, right? So there's a bit of a debate. You're like, when I do translation, I don't want to be refreshing my whole application all over again. I just wanted to like, if it's English, just switch to French at once. But this becomes a problem when it comes to your applications, your apps bundle, because the heavier your apps bundle is, the problematic it becomes when it comes to performance, even for people who maybe don't have really good internet. So it's important for it to reload so that it can leave whatever was supposed to be, leave whatever is there, so that you can go for whatever it was to load up. So from English to French, not from English and then wait for French to come in, because a lot of heavy lifting the app needs to do. And then the translation files are not really tree shakeable because it's hard to know which language to be used and which one won't. So when you apply all this translation at runtime, this means you're loading all the translation strings, even if it's not used inside the application. And this will, and because with the Angular built only includes strings used in the app. So this means that you're going to load everything all at the same time, but it doesn't necessarily know which one is supposed to load or which one is not supposed to load. So for you to be able to avoid that, that's why it has different builds. And when it comes to testing locally, you just need to set which flag you want it to build. You want it to show on your local machine. So it's built already. So if you look at our list folder, you're going to see we have DEEN, ENUS, which is the default one. And then we also have ES for Spanish. And also we have French, which is FR. So when you deploy this, for example, I deployed mine on Firebase, you'll be able to see those different translations. For some reason, it was working initially because I had it earlier, but for some reason it's not working right now. But you could see that if you select Spanish, it is changes to Spanish. If it was French, changes to French, based on this particular, based on the particular URL that you're serving it at. Right. So I think that's pretty much it from my side. Unless you have any questions.
This is great. Do you have any example for a number? Like, how can we display a number or a date in the?
Um, mhm. Yeah.
in-
So
yeah, okay.
unfortunately, I don't have an example for that, but I can definitely share with you after this.
Okay, that would be
Yeah.
great. And can you also share this repository so I can include
Yes.
it in the description?
Yes, I will
Oh,
do that. Definitely.
that's great. And once again, thank you very much. A very interesting pair programming session, coding session. Thank you, Wayne. And yeah, thank you for your sessions. I'm going to stop the recording.